Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Pioneer and watched the stars through the main window. The ship moved through space at speeds that would have seemed impossible to humans just 50 years ago. Jake had been in space for most of his adult life, but he still felt amazed when he looked at the endless darkness filled with tiny lights. The Pioneer was humanity's newest and fastest ship. It carried a crew of 42 people who had volunteered for a mission that would take them farther from Earth than any human had ever gone before. They were explorers and scientists who wanted to see what lay beyond the edge of known space. Navigator Lisa Chen walked over to Jake and held a data pad in her hands. She had been studying the sensor readings for the past hour, and her face showed concern. Lisa was one of the best navigators in the human fleet, and Jake trusted her judgment completely. "Captain, we are picking up some strange readings ahead," Lisa said as she handed him the data pad. "There is an area of space that seems to be giving off unusual energy patterns. The computer cannot identify what type of energy it is." Jake looked at the readings and frowned. The energy signatures were unlike anything he had seen before. They seemed to pulse and shift in ways that made no sense according to human science. The readings were coming from a region of space that their star charts showed as empty. "How far away is this energy source?" Jake asked. "About 6 hours at our current speed," Lisa replied. "But Captain, there is something else you should know. We received a message from a passing alien ship about an hour ago. They warned us to stay away from that area of space." Jake raised his eyebrows. The Pioneer had encountered several alien species during their journey, and most had been friendly. It was unusual for aliens to give warnings unless there was real danger. Chief Engineer Ryan Blake joined them on the bridge. Ryan was a tall man with steady hands who could fix anything on the ship. He had been monitoring the ship's systems and wanted to report on their status. "Captain, all systems are running perfectly," Ryan said. "The new quantum drive is working better than we expected. We could probably push the ship even faster if we needed to." Jake nodded and turned back to Lisa. "What exactly did the alien ship tell us about that area of space?" Lisa checked her notes. "The alien captain called it the Nexus Void. He said it was a forbidden zone where ships go in but never come out. He seemed genuinely frightened when he talked about it. The alien used words like devourers and ancient evil tactical officer Susan." Martinez had been listening to the conversation from her station. Susan was responsible for the ship's weapons and defenses. She was also one of the most curious people Jake had ever met, Captain Susan said as she walked over to join them. "I have been thinking about this forbidden zone. What if the aliens are wrong about it being dangerous? What if there is something valuable there that they want to keep for themselves?" Jake considered her words. Humans had learned that some alien species were not always honest about their intentions. It was possible that this forbidden zone contained resources or technology that the aliens wanted to protect. "The energy readings are definitely unusual," Ryan said as he looked at the data pad. "I have never seen anything like this before. It could be some kind of advanced technology." Chief Medical Officer Tony Ramirez entered the bridge and immediately sensed the tension in the room. Tony was responsible for keeping the crew healthy, and he was also trained to recognize when people were making dangerous decisions. "What is going on?" Tony asked. Jake explained the situation to Tony and watched as the doctor's face grew serious. Tony had served in the military before joining the space program, and he understood the importance of following safety protocols. "Captain, I think we should listen to the alien warning," Tony said. "If multiple alien species consider this area dangerous, then there might be a good reason for it." Jake looked around at his crew. He could see that they were divided about what to do. Some wanted to investigate the mysterious energy source, while others thought they should avoid the forbidden zone. "Captain," Lisa said quietly, "I have been studying the navigation charts. If we go around the forbidden zone, it will add 3 weeks to our mission. We are already running low on some supplies." Jake felt the weight of command on his shoulders. Every decision he made affected the lives of 42 people. He knew that exploring unknown regions of space always involved risks, but that was why they were here. The Pioneer had been built for exploration and discovery. The crew had trained for years to handle dangerous situations. Jake believed that humanity's greatest strength was their willingness to go where others feared to venture, set course for the energy source. Jake finally said, "But I want all defensive systems ready and everyone on alert. If we encounter any real danger, we will retreat immediately." Lisa nodded and began entering the new course into the navigation computer. Susan returned to her station and started checking the ship's weapons systems. Ryan went back to engineering to make sure the ship was ready for whatever they might encounter. As the Pioneer changed course toward the Forbidden Zone, Jake felt a mixture of excitement and fear. He knew they were about to enter unknown territory, where no human had ever been before. Whatever they found there would become part of human history. The stars ahead seemed to grow darker as they approached the mysterious region of space that aliens called the Nexus Void. The Pioneer approached the edge of the Nexus Void, and Jake could see that space itself looked different here. The stars seemed dimmer, and the darkness between them appeared thicker somehow. The ship's sensors were going crazy with readings that made no sense. "Captain, we are detecting massive gravitational distortions," Lisa reported from her station. "Space-time appears to be twisted in ways that should not be possible. The navigation computer is having trouble calculating safe routes." Jake studied the main screen, which showed a swirling mass of dark energy that stretched for light years in every direction. It looked like a cosmic storm frozen in time. Strange lights flickered deep within the darkness and vanished before the sensors could lock on to them. "What are our defensive options?" Jake asked Susan. "All weapons are ready, but I am not sure how effective they will be against whatever is in there," Susan replied. "Our energy shields are at maximum power. The armor plating has been reinforced, and all emergency systems are standing by." Ryan's voice came through the communication system from the engineering deck. "Captain, the quantum drive is responding strangely to the energy fields out there. I'm reading power fluctuations that I've never seen before. The drive seems to be resonating with something in the void." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The quantum drive was humanity's most advanced technology, and if it was being affected by the energy in the void, then they were dealing with forces beyond human understanding. "Take us in slowly," Jake ordered. "Reduce speed to quarter impulse and keep all sensors active. I want to know about any changes immediately." The Pioneer moved forward into the swirling darkness, and immediately everything changed. The ship began to shake as invisible forces pulled at the hull. The lights on the bridge flickered and strange sounds echoed through the corridors. "Hull integrity is holding," Ryan reported. "But we are experiencing stress on all structural supports. Whatever is out there is trying to tear the ship apart." Jake gripped the arms of his command chair as the Pioneer pushed deeper into the void. Through the main window, he could see tendrils of dark energy reaching toward the ship like grasping fingers. The sight made him feel sick, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Captain, I am detecting movement," Susan said with tension in her voice. "There are large objects approaching our position from multiple directions. They do not match any known ship. Designs!" The main screen shifted to show the tactical display, and Jake saw dozens of massive shapes moving through the darkness toward the Pioneer. The shapes seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and they moved in ways that defied physics. "Are they ships?" Jake asked. "I do not think so," Susan replied. "They appear to be some kind of living creatures, but they are each the size of a battleship. They are made of the same dark energy that fills this region of space." Tony's voice came through the communication system from the medical bay. "Captain, I am getting reports of crew members feeling dizzy and confused. Several people have complained about hearing voices that are not there." Jake felt a growing sense of dread. Whatever lived in the Nexus Void was already affecting his crew, and they had barely entered the region. He began to understand why the aliens considered this place forbidden. "Lisa, can you plot a course out of here?" Jake asked. "I am trying, Captain, But the gravitational distortions are making navigation extremely difficult, Lisa replied. The computer cannot get a lock on our position relative to normal space. The dark creatures were getting closer, and Jake could see that they were definitely alive. They moved with purpose and intelligence as they surrounded the Pioneer. Strange. Patterns of light pulsed along their surfaces like veins carrying luminous blood. They are trying to communicate, Susan reported. I am detecting some kind of telepathic signal, but it is too alien for our translation computers to understand. Jake stood up from his chair and walked to the main window. One of the creatures had approached close enough for him to see details of its structure. It looked like a living shadow with parts that shifted and flowed like liquid darkness. Eyes that burned with cold fire stared back at him. Suddenly, pain shot through Jake's head as something invaded his mind. Images and sensations that were not his own flooded his consciousness. He saw flashes of other ships that had entered the void over the centuries. He witnessed crews being consumed by the dark creatures as their life force was drained away. The creature in his mind spoke without words. It told him that he and his crew would join the countless others who had fed the hunger of the Umbral Syndicate. It explained that they were ancient beings who sustained themselves on the bioelectric energy of living minds. Jake fought against the mental intrusion with all his strength. He focused on memories of Earth and his family and his duty to protect his crew. The creature seemed surprised by his resistance, and the pain in his head decreased slightly. Captain, the creatures are extending some kind of energy tentacles toward the ship, Susan shouted. They are trying to penetrate our hull. Jake could feel the ship shuddering as the dark tentacles made contact with the Pioneer's armor. He could hear metal groaning under stress, and alarms began sounding throughout the ship. All hands prepare. For boarding action, Jake announced over the ship-wide communication system. We are under attack by hostile alien forces. Defend yourselves and protect your fellow crew members. Ryan's voice crackled through the speakers. Captain, the tentacles are passing right through our hull like it is not there. They seem to be made of some kind of energy that our armor cannot stop. Jake watched in horror as dark tentacles emerged from the walls and ceiling of the bridge. The other crew members drew their weapons, but the energy blasts passed harmlessly through the creatures. The tentacles moved toward each person as if drawn by their life force. The weapons are useless, Susan said as she continued firing. Nothing we have can hurt them. Jake felt a tentacle wrap around his arm, and immediately his strength began to drain away. The creature was feeding on his life energy, and he could feel himself getting weaker. But something unexpected happened. Instead of being consumed like the alien victims he had seen in the visions, Jake felt anger rising within him. The anger grew stronger as he thought about his crew being attacked by these parasitic creatures. He refused to let them feed on his people without a fight. The tentacle around his arm began to smoke, and the creature pulled back with what sounded like a cry of pain. Fight back with your minds, Jake shouted to his crew. Use your anger and your will to live. They cannot handle human emotions. The crew of the Pioneer discovered that Jake was right about fighting with their minds. When Lisa felt the dark tentacle touching her, she thought about her daughter back on Earth and refused to let these creatures steal her chance to see her child again. The tentacle recoiled and made a sound like steam escaping from a broken pipe. Ryan was in the engineering section when the creatures attacked him. He focused on his love for building and fixing things and his determination to keep the ship running. The dark energy that tried to drain his life force seemed to bounce off his stubborn refusal to give up. Susan used her military training to channel her anger into a focused weapon. She thought about protecting her crewmates and defending humanity from these parasites. The creatures that tried to feed on her actually caught fire and retreated with obvious pain. Throughout the ship, the same pattern repeated itself. The Umbral Syndicate had fed on thousands of alien species over the centuries, but they had never encountered minds like human minds. Where other species had organized and predictable thought patterns, humans were chaotic and emotional in ways that confused the creatures. Tony was treating injured crew members in the medical bay when he realized something important. The creatures seemed to have trouble processing human emotions like love and anger and hope. These feelings created a kind of mental static that interfered with their feeding process. Captain Tony's voice came through the communication system. "I think I understand what is happening. The creatures feed on bioelectric energy, but human brains produce electrical patterns that are different from other species. Our emotions are literally poisonous to them." Jake felt hope rising in his chest as he heard Tony's words. If human thoughts could hurt these creatures, then they had a chance to survive. But he also realized they needed to learn more about their enemies if they were going to escape the Nexus Void. "Lisa, can you access the ship's database and search for any information about ancient civilizations in this region?" Jake asked Lisa's. Fingers flew over her control panel as she searched through humanity's collected knowledge about galactic history. Most of the information came from alien sources, but there were references to an ancient race called the progenitors who had once ruled this part of space. "Captain, I found something," Lisa said excitedly. According to these records, the progenitors were an advanced civilization that disappeared about 3,000 years ago. They were known for creating the first galactic communication networks. Jake felt the pieces of a puzzle beginning to fit together. If the progenitors had vanished 3,000 years ago, and the Umbral Syndicate had been in the Nexus Void for the same amount of time, then the creatures had probably destroyed the ancient civilization. "Keep searching," Jake ordered. "Look for any information about progenitor technology or weapons." While Lisa searched the database, Jake watched the dark creatures circling the Pioneer like predators, waiting for their prey to weaken. He could feel their hunger and frustration as they tried to figure out how to feed on the human crew. Ryan's voice came through the speakers with excitement. "Captain, I have been analyzing the quantum drive's interaction with the energy fields in this region. The drive is not just resonating with the void energy, it is actually amplifying our neural patterns somehow." Jake did not fully understand the science behind Ryan's discovery, but he could sense that it was important. If the quantum drive was connected to their ability to resist the creatures, then it might also be the key to defeating them. "Susan, have the creatures shown any signs of intelligence beyond their hunting instincts?" Jake asked. "Yes, Captain," Susan replied. "They are definitely communicating with each other, and they seem to be developing new strategies to attack us. They are learning from their failures." Jake realized that they were in a race against time. The Umbral Syndicate would eventually figure out how to overcome human resistance if given enough time. The crew needed to find a way to escape or destroy the creatures before that happened. "Lisa, what else can you find about the progenitors?" Jake asked urgently. "There are references to some kind of fail-safe weapon that they created," Lisa said as she continued searching. "The records are incomplete, but it mentions something called the Nexus Core that was designed to destroy threats to galactic civilization." Jake felt his heart racing as he heard about the progenitor weapon. If such a device existed, and if they could find it, then they might have a chance to eliminate the Umbral Syndicate permanently. "Can you determine the location of this Nexus Core?" Jake asked. "I am trying, Captain, but the gravitational distortions in this region are interfering with our sensors," Lisa replied. "Wait, I am getting something. There appears to be a large artificial structure about 50 kilometers from our current position." Jake looked at the tactical display and saw a faint outline of something massive hidden in the swirling darkness of the void. The structure was larger than any ship he had ever seen, and it appeared to be partially phased out of normal space. "Ryan, Can you get us to that structure without the creatures stopping us? Jake asked. I can try, Captain, Ryan replied. But we will have to push the quantum drive beyond its normal limits. There is a risk that we could lose containment and destroy the ship. Jake weighed their options carefully. They could try to escape the Nexus void and leave the Umbral Syndicate to continue terrorizing other species. Or they could risk everything to reach the progenitor weapon and potentially end the threat forever. Tony, how is the crew holding up? Jake asked. They are tired from fighting off the mental attacks, but their spirits are high, Tony replied. Everyone understands what is at stake here. They are ready to follow your orders no matter how dangerous. Jake felt proud of his crew and their courage, in the face of cosmic horror. These 42 humans were facing beings that had destroyed entire civilizations, but they refused to surrender or retreat. All hands, this is the captain, Jake announced over the ship-wide communication system. We have discovered the possible location of an ancient weapon that could destroy these creatures permanently. We are going to attempt to reach it, but the journey will be extremely dangerous. Anyone who wants to object to this plan should speak. Now. The communication system remained silent as Jake waited for responses. No one on the Pioneer wanted to abandon the mission or leave the galaxy at the mercy of the Umbral Syndicate. Ryan, take us to the progenitor structure, Jake ordered. Push the quantum drive as hard as necessary. We are going to end this threat once and for all. The Pioneer surged forward through the dark energy fields as Ryan pushed the quantum drive to maximum power. The ship shook violently as it fought against the gravitational forces that tried to tear it apart. Behind them, the Umbral Syndicate. Creatures followed in a massive swarm that blocked out the stars. Hull stress is approaching critical levels, Ryan reported from engineering. I do not know how much more the ship can take. Jake gripped his command chair as the Pioneer bucked and rolled through the chaotic energy fields. Through the main window, he could see the progenitor structure growing larger as they approached. It was a massive crystalline construct that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in some other dimension. Captain, the structure is sending out some kind of scanning beam, Susan reported. It appears to be analyzing our ship and crew. Jake felt a tingling sensation as the alien scanning beam passed through his body. Unlike the painful mental intrusion of the umbral creatures, this scan felt neutral and scientific. He sensed an ancient intelligence examining him and his crew with careful attention. The scan is complete, Susan said. The structure is opening. What appears to be a docking bay, Lisa guided the Pioneer toward the opening in the crystalline structure while the umbral creatures pressed their attack. Dark tentacles lashed at the ship's hull, and Jake could hear metal groaning under the stress. Several crew members reported that the creatures were trying harder than ever to penetrate their minds. We are inside the structure, Lisa announced as the docking bay doors closed behind them. Jake felt relief as the pressure from the umbral attack suddenly disappeared. The inside of the progenitor structure was filled with clean white light that seemed to push back the darkness of the void. The air itself felt different here, as if it was charged with positive energy. Tony scanned the atmosphere inside this structure, Jake ordered. I want to know if it is safe for humans to breathe. The atmosphere is actually better than ship's air, Tony replied with amazement. It contains trace elements that seem to be beneficial to human physiology. Whatever the progenitors were, they designed this place to be welcoming to oxygen-breathing species. Jake made the decision to explore the structure in person. He selected a small team consisting of Susan, Lisa, Ryan, and Tony to accompany him while the rest of the crew remained on the Pioneer. They armed themselves with energy weapons, even though they knew the weapons were useless against the umbral creatures. The airlock opened, and Jake stepped into the progenitor structure. The walls were made of the same crystalline material as the exterior, but they pulsed with soft light that seemed to respond to their presence. Corridors stretched in multiple directions, and Jake could sense vast spaces beyond their immediate view. "Captain, look at these symbols on the walls," Lisa said as she pointed to glowing markings that covered every surface. The symbols were unlike any writing system that humans had encountered, but as Jake looked at them, they seemed to shift and change until they became readable English text. The progenitor technology was translating itself for their benefit. "Welcome, children of thought and chaos," the symbols read. "You have found your way to the last hope of the ancient compact. We are the progenitors, and we have been waiting for minds like yours for 3,000 years. Jake felt a chill as he read the words. The progenitors had somehow known that a species like humanity would eventually appear. They had built this structure as a trap for the Umbral Syndicate and a beacon for the beings who could activate it. The team followed the glowing corridors, deeper into the structure until they reached a vast central chamber. In the middle of the chamber stood a pillar of pure energy that reached from floor to ceiling. Around the pillar were control panels covered with symbols that translated themselves as Jake watched. "This is the Nexus Core," the symbols explained. "It is a dimensional weapon designed to eliminate the shadow feeders from this reality. Only beings with chaotic neural patterns can safely activate the device." Ryan approached one of the control panels and studied the translated instructions. "Captain, this weapon works by creating a quantum cascade that will destroy all dark energy beings in this region of space. But activating it will also collapse the dimensional pocket that contains the Nexus Void." Jake understood the implications immediately. Using the weapon would destroy the Umbral Syndicate, but it would also trap anyone inside the Void when it collapsed. The Pioneer and its crew would be sacrificed to save the rest of the galaxy. "Is there any way to escape after activating the weapon?" Jake asked. "The progenitors included escape protocols," Lisa said as she read from another control panel. "But they require the quantum drive to be modified in ways that have never been tested. The survival chance is less than 10%. Susan was studying the tactical information displayed on the walls. "Captain, the weapon will take approximately 30 minutes to charge after activation. During that time, the Umbral creatures will try everything to stop us. They will throw their entire force against this structure." Tony was examining medical data that the progenitors had left behind. "The records show that exposure to the weapon's charging energy will be harmful to biological life forms. We will need to rotate crew assignments to prevent anyone from receiving a fatal dose." Jake looked around at his team and saw determination in their faces. They understood the risks, but they also understood what was at stake. The Umbral Syndicate had been terrorizing the galaxy for 3,000 years, and humanity had the chance to end that reign of terror. "Ryan, how long would it take to modify the quantum drive according to the progenitor specifications?" Jake asked. "At least 6 hours," Ryan replied. "And that is assuming everything goes perfectly. We would need to completely rewire the primary systems while under attack from the creatures." Jake made his decision. "We are going to do this." Ryan began the modifications immediately. Susan prepared defensive positions throughout the structure. Lisa plot the escape course we will need. Tony prepare medical supplies for radiation exposure. As the team prepared to implement their desperate plan, Jake felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He was about to commit his crew to a mission that would likely result in their deaths. But he also knew that this was why they had come to space in the first place. Humanity had always been willing to sacrifice for the greater good, and now they had the chance to save countless alien civilizations from the horror of the Umbral Syndicate. The crew of the Pioneer would write their names in galactic history as the humans who ended 3,000 years of terror. All hands, this is the captain, Jake announced over the communication system. We have found the weapon that can destroy our enemies, but using it will put us all at great risk. I am giving everyone the chance to voice their opinion about whether we should proceed. The response was immediate and unanimous. Every member of the crew voted to activate the progenitor weapon regardless of the personal cost. They had come too far and learned too much to turn back now. Ryan worked frantically in the engineering section of the Pioneer to modify the quantum drive according to the progenitor specifications. The alien technology was far beyond human understanding, but the translated instructions were clear enough for him to follow. He rerouted power conduits and rewired control systems while sweat poured down his face. "Captain, the modifications are 60% complete," Ryan reported. "But I am seeing some concerning fluctuations in the quantum containment field. If the field collapses while I am working on it, the explosion will destroy half the structure." Jake stood in the central chamber of the progenitor facility and watched the energy pillar pulse with increasing intensity. The Nexus core was responding to the presence of human minds and preparing itself for activation. Around him, the crystalline walls showed tactical displays of the Umbral Syndicate forces gathering outside. "The creatures know what we are planning," Susan said as she studied the displays. "They are massing for a major assault on the structure. I count over 200 individual entities approaching our position." Lisa was working at a control panel to understand the escape protocols left by the progenitors. The information was complex, and she was having trouble determining if the plan would actually work. "Captain, the escape route requires us to punch through a dimensional barrier at the exact moment the weapon fires. The timing has to be perfect, or we will be trapped in collapsing space." Tony moved between different sections of the structure to monitor the radiation levels as the Nexus core charged. The progenitor weapon was already affecting the crew, and he could see signs of cellular damage beginning to appear. "We need to limit exposure time for all personnel. I recommend rotating everyone through shielded areas every 15 minutes. Jake felt the enormous responsibility of command as he coordinated the desperate mission. His crew was risking everything based on his decision to activate an alien weapon that they barely understood. But he also knew that this was humanity's greatest strength, their willingness to take impossible risks for the right reasons. "Captain, the first wave of creatures is attacking the outer hull," Susan announced, as alarms began sounding throughout the structure. The progenitor facility shook as the Umbral Syndicate threw their full force against the crystalline walls. Jake could see dark tentacles probing for weaknesses in the structure's defenses. The ancient builders had designed their facility to withstand attacks, but 3,000 years of time had weakened some systems. "The outer shields are holding, but they are draining power from the main weapon," Lisa reported. "If the assault continues at this intensity, we will not have enough energy to complete the charging sequence." Jake realized they needed to buy more time for the weapon to charge. The progenitor records mentioned that the Nexus core became more effective as it absorbed energy from human neural patterns. If the crew could somehow amplify their mental output, they might be able to speed up the charging process. Tony: "What happens if we increase our brain activity while near the energy pillar?" Jake asked. "That would be extremely dangerous," Tony replied. "The radiation exposure would increase dramatically, and prolonged contact could cause permanent damage or death." Jake weighed the risks against the potential benefits. If they could not charge the weapon fast enough, then the mission would fail, and the Umbral Syndicate would continue terrorizing the galaxy. The crew of the Pioneer had already accepted that they might not survive this mission. Ryan. How much longer do you need to complete the drive modifications? Jake asked. At least 3 more hours, Captain, Ryan replied. I am working as fast as I can, but this technology is incredibly complex. Jake made another difficult decision. Susan select volunteers to help accelerate the weapon charging by direct neural contact with the energy pillar. Make sure everyone understands the risks. Susan did not need to ask for volunteers because half the crew immediately stepped forward. They understood that someone had to take the risk, and they were ready to sacrifice themselves for the mission. Jake felt proud of their courage, but also heartbroken that he had to ask such a thing of them. The first group of volunteers approached the energy pillar and placed their hands on its surface. Immediately, the pillar began glowing brighter, and the charging process accelerated. But Jake could see the volunteers trembling as the alien energy coursed through their bodies. The weapon charging rate has increased by 40%, Lisa reported. But the volunteers are showing signs of severe neural stress. Jake watched as his crew members pushed themselves beyond human limits to power the ancient weapon. Their faces showed pain, but also determination as they fed their life force into the progenitor technology. After 10 minutes, the first group collapsed and had to be carried to safety. The second group of volunteers took their place at the energy pillar and continued the process. Outside the structure, the umbral creatures pressed their attack with increasing desperation. They could sense that something was threatening their existence, and they threw themselves against the progenitor defenses with suicidal fury. The outer shields are down to 30%, Susan announced. The creatures are starting to break through, the hull in several locations. Dark tentacles began emerging from the walls and ceiling as the umbral syndicate penetrated the structure's defenses. The crew fought back with their weapons and their minds as they had learned to do on the Pioneer, but there were too many creatures and they were getting stronger as they fed on fear and desperation. Captain, the weapon is at 90% charge, Lisa shouted over the sounds of battle. Just 5 more minutes and we can fire. Jake grabbed an energy rifle and joined the fight against the creatures that were swarming into the central chamber. He focused his anger and determination into a mental weapon that made the dark beings recoil from his presence. Around him, his crew did the same as they fought for their lives. Ryan, status report, Jake called out as he fired at a massive creature that was trying to reach the energy pillar. Modifications are complete, Ryan replied. The quantum drive is ready for the escape attempt, but I cannot guarantee it will work. Jake felt hope rising in his chest as the weapon approached full charge. They had come so far and sacrificed so much that failure was no longer an acceptable option. The crew of the Pioneer would either save the galaxy or die trying. Weapon at 100%, Lisa announced. Ready to fire on your command, Captain. Jake looked around at his crew, who were still fighting the umbral creatures despite their injuries and exhaustion. These brave humans had given everything they had to reach this moment. Now it was time to see if their sacrifice would save countless other lives. Fire the weapon, Jake ordered. The Nexus core erupted with brilliant light that filled the entire structure and spilled out into the dark void beyond. The Nexus core unleashed a wave of pure energy that swept through the entire Nexus void in seconds. Jake felt the blast wash over him like a tide of liquid lightning, but instead of burning him, the energy seemed to strengthen his resolve and clear his mind. The progenitor weapon was designed to destroy dark energy beings while leaving other life forms unharmed. The umbral creatures that had been attacking the structure suddenly froze in place as the energy wave reached them. Jake watched as their dark forms began to dissolve like shadows when light is turned on. The beings that had terrorized the galaxy for 3,000 years were finally meeting their end. "Captain, the weapon is working!" Susan shouted with excitement. "The creatures throughout the void are being destroyed!" Jake could see through the crystalline walls as the energy wave spread outward from the progenitor structure. Wherever the light touched the Umbral Syndicate creatures, they simply ceased to exist. The ancient evil that had consumed countless civilizations was being erased from reality. But Jake also knew that their victory came with a price. The dimensional pocket that contained the Nexus Void was beginning to collapse as the weapon did its work. Space itself was folding inward, and the structure around them shook as reality warped. "Lisa, how much time do we have before the dimensional collapse reaches us?" Jake asked. "Less than 10 minutes, Lisa replied as she monitored the spatial distortions. "We need to attempt the escape now, or we will be trapped forever." Jake turned to address his crew who had gathered in the central chamber. Many of them were injured from the battle with the creatures, and all of them showed signs of radiation exposure from the weapon, but their eyes still held the determination that had brought them this far. "Ryan, is the quantum drive ready for the escape attempt?" Jake asked. "Yes, Captain," Ryan replied, "but I have to warn you that the modifications are untested. We could end up scattered across several dimensions, or we could simply explode when we try to activate the drive." Jake nodded grimly. Their choices were to attempt the dangerous escape or to remain in the collapsing void and die as heroes. Either way, the Umbral Syndicate was destroyed and the galaxy was safe. "All hands return to the Pioneer immediately," Jake ordered. "We are going to try to punch through the dimensional barrier." The crew ran through the corridors of the progenitor structure as it shook and groaned around them. Jake could see cracks appearing in the crystalline walls as the dimensional collapse accelerated. They had minutes before the entire region of space folded in on itself. "Thank you for what you have done," appeared in glowing symbols on the walls as they passed. "The progenitors are at peace knowing the shadow feeders can no longer harm the innocent." Jake felt a moment of sadness for the ancient race that had built this trap and waited thousands of years for someone to activate it. The progenitors had sacrificed their entire civilization to create a weapon that could destroy the Umbral Syndicate. The crew reached the Pioneer and immediately began preparing for the escape attempt. Ryan raced to the engineering section to monitor the modified quantum drive, while Lisa plotted their course through the collapsing dimensions. Susan prepared the ship's defenses, even though they would be useless against the forces they were about. "To face Captain, all stations report ready," Lisa announced. "But I should mention that the navigation computers cannot calculate our destination. We will be flying blind through dimensional space." Jake strapped himself into the command chair and felt the familiar weight of decision on his shoulders. He had led his crew into the most dangerous region of known space, and now he was asking them to trust him with an escape plan that defied all understanding of physics. "Tony, how is the crew handling the stress?" Jake asked. "Everyone is scared, but they are ready," Tony replied. "They know that we have already accomplished something that will be remembered for thousands of years. Whatever happens next, they are proud to be part of this mission." Jake felt emotional as he heard Tony's words. The 42 men and women on the Pioneer had shown courage that went beyond anything expected of humans. They had faced cosmic horror and refused to surrender. "Ryan, initiate the quantum drive modifications," Jake ordered. The ship began to vibrate as the modified quantum drive activated systems that had never been tested. Jake could feel reality shifting around them as the Pioneer prepared to attempt something that no ship had ever tried before. "Captain, the dimensional barrier is directly ahead," Lisa reported. The progenitor structure is collapsing behind us, and the void is shrinking rapidly. Jake could see the barrier through the main window. It looked like a wall of twisted space that stretched infinitely in all directions. Beyond the barrier was normal space where the stars shone with steady light. "All hands brace for impact," Jake announced. "We are going to ram through the dimensional barrier at maximum speed." Ryan pushed the quantum drive beyond all safety limits as the Pioneer accelerated toward the barrier. The ship's hull began to glow as exotic particles from the modified drive created a protective field around them. "Hull temperature is rising rapidly," Susan reported. "We are approaching the structural limits of the ship." Jake gripped his chair as the Pioneer struck the dimensional barrier with the force of a runaway comet. The ship shuddered and groaned as it fought to break through the wall between dimensions. Through the speakers, Jake could hear metal screaming under impossible stress. "Drive containment is fluctuating," Ryan shouted from engineering. "I do not know how much longer I can hold it together." The Pioneer pushed deeper into the barrier as space warped around them. Jake could see stars and darkness and impossible colors swirling outside the ship. They were traveling through regions where the normal laws of physics did not apply. "We are breaking through," Lisa announced with amazement in her voice. Jake felt the ship surge forward as they burst through the dimensional barrier into normal space. Behind them, the Nexus void collapsed completely and vanished as if it had never existed. The region that had been forbidden for 3,000 years was now empty space filled with ordinary starlight. "All stations report status," Jake ordered as he tried to comprehend what they had just accomplished. "Hull integrity is damaged but holding," Susan reported. "We have multiple system failures, but nothing critical. The quantum drive is offline and will need major repairs," Ryan added. "But we are alive and we are in normal space." Jake looked around at his crew and saw exhaustion and relief on their faces. They had survived the impossible and accomplished something that would change galactic history. The Umbral Syndicate was destroyed, and the galaxy was free from 3,000 years of terror. The Pioneer drifted through normal space as the crew worked to repair the damage from their escape through the dimensional barrier. Jake stood on the bridge and looked out at the stars that seemed brighter somehow now that the ancient darkness was gone. The region where the Nexus void had existed for 3,000 years was now filled with ordinary space. "Captain, we are receiving multiple communication signals," Lisa reported from her station. "Ships throughout this sector are asking what happened to the Forbidden Zone." The energy release from the weapon was detected across half the galaxy. Jake realized that news of their victory would spread quickly through the galactic community. Alien species that had lived in fear of the Nexus void for millennia would learn that the threat was finally gone. The story of how humans had accomplished the impossible would become legend. "Are any of the signals from Earth?" Jake asked hopefully. "Not yet, Captain," Lisa replied. "We are still too far from human space for direct communication, but I am detecting several alien ships approaching our position." Jake felt tension returning as he wondered about the intentions of the approaching vessels. The crew of the Pioneer had just destroyed an ancient threat, but they were still alone in alien space with a damaged ship. "Susan, identify the approaching ships," Jake ordered. "I am reading 3 vessels of different alien designs," Susan reported. "One appears to be the same type as the merchant ship that warned us about the void. The other 2 are unknown configurations." Jake remembered the alien captain who had tried to warn them away from the Nexus void. The merchant had seemed genuinely frightened of the Forbidden Zone and had probably expected never to see the Pioneer again. "Captain, the lead ship is hailing us," Lisa announced. "Put them through." Jake said as he prepared to explain what had happened. The main screen activated and showed the face of Vextar, the alien merchant who had warned them about the void. The creature's expression showed amazement and disbelief as he stared at the human captain. "This is impossible," Vextar said in accented but understandable English. "Your ship entered the Nexus Void and no ship has ever returned from that cursed region. How are you still alive?" Jake chose his words carefully as he replied. "We encountered the beings that lived in the void, and we found a way to destroy them. The threat that has terrorized this region for 3,000 years is gone." Vextar's expression changed to shock, and then to something that might have been hope. "The shadow feeders are truly destroyed. This cannot be possible. My people have feared that region since before our recorded history began." "It is true," Jake confirmed. "We activated an ancient weapon left by the progenitors, and it eliminated all the creatures in the void. The dimensional pocket that contained them has collapsed, and normal space has returned." The other ships that had approached were also requesting communication, and Jake could see that word was spreading rapidly. Within hours, every species in this sector of the galaxy would know that humans had accomplished what entire fleets could not. "Captain Jake Morrison of Earth," Vextar said formally. "Your species has done something that will be remembered until the stars burn out. The Galactic Council must hear of this immediately." Jake felt the weight of representing humanity to the galactic community. The actions of the pioneer crew would shape how other species viewed humans for generations to come. He wanted to make sure the story was told correctly. "We were explorers seeking knowledge," Jake explained. "When we learned about the threat in the void, we chose to risk our lives to eliminate it. This is what humans do when innocent lives are at stake." Tony's voice came through the communication system from the medical bay. "Captain, I need to report on the crew's condition. Everyone is suffering from radiation exposure, and several people have serious injuries. We need medical assistance soon." Jake realized that their victory had come at a high cost. The crew had pushed themselves beyond human limits to activate the progenitor weapon, and many were paying the price for their heroism. "Vextar, do you have medical facilities on your ship?" Jake asked. "We have basic medical equipment, but nothing designed for human physiology," the alien replied. "However, I know of a station not far from here that has advanced medical technology. I will escort you there personally." Jake felt grateful for the alien's offer of help. After the horror they had faced in the void, it was comforting to encounter kindness from another species. Ryan's voice crackled through the speakers from engineering. "Captain, the quantum drive is completely offline and will require shipyard facilities to repair. We are limited to conventional propulsion until we can reach a proper repair facility." Jake nodded and turned back to the communication screen. "Vextar, we would appreciate your assistance in reaching medical and repair facilities. Our ship was damaged during the escape from the collapsing void. It will be my honor to help the humans who freed the galaxy from 3,000 years of terror," Vextar replied. "Follow my ship, and I will guide you to safety," as the pioneer followed the alien. Merchant vessel toward the medical station, Jake reflected on what his crew had accomplished. They had entered a region of space that was considered impossible to survive, and they had eliminated a threat that had consumed entire civilizations, but Jake also knew that their story was just beginning. News of humanity's victory over the Umbral. Syndicate would reach every corner of the galaxy and change how other species viewed humans forever. The crew of the Pioneer had proven that humanity belonged among the stars. "Lisa, send a message to Earth Command," Jake ordered. Tell them that the mission was successful and that we are safe. Include a full report of what we discovered and accomplished." "Yes, Captain," Lisa replied. "They are going to find this hard to believe." Jake smiled as he thought about the reaction. Back on Earth, when officials learned that a single human ship had accomplished something that the entire Galactic Council had deemed impossible. Humanity had always been underestimated by other species, but the Pioneer had proven that humans were capable of extraordinary things. "Captain, we are approaching the medical station," Susan reported. "The aliens there are already preparing to receive casualties." Jake felt relief knowing that his injured crew members would receive proper medical care. They had risked everything to save the galaxy, and now it was time to make sure they all survived to see the recognition they deserved. The Pioneer docked at the alien medical station, and Jake watched as his crew was taken to advanced treatment facilities. The alien doctors were fascinated by human physiology and worked carefully to treat the radiation exposure and other injuries as Jake waited for news about his crew. He realized that their lives would never be the same. They had become legends. In a single day, and their names would be spoken with reverence throughout the galaxy. The 42 humans who had destroyed the Umbral Syndicate would be remembered as heroes for thousands of years. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood before the Galactic Council on the capital world of Nexus Prime and looked out at representatives from hundreds of alien species. The Great Assembly Hall was filled with beings of every shape and size imaginable. But all of them shared the same expression of respect and gratitude as they looked at the human captain. The story of the Pioneer's mission had spread throughout the galaxy faster than anyone could have imagined. Every species that had lived in fear of the Nexus Void wanted to hear the details of how a single human ship had accomplished the impossible. Jake and his crew had become the most famous beings in known space. Captain Morrison spoke the council. Chairman, who was a tall, crystalline being with multiple eyes. "On behalf of the trillion sentient lives in this galaxy, we offer our eternal gratitude for your species' courage and sacrifice." Jake felt humbled by the formal recognition, but he also felt proud of what humanity had accomplished. The crew of the Pioneer had proven that humans deserved their place among the stars and had earned the respect of countless alien civilizations. Behind Jake stood the other members of his crew who had survived the mission. Tony had made a full recovery from his radiation exposure and now served as humanity's chief medical advisor to the Galactic Council. Ryan had been appointed as the head of a new joint technology research program that would study progenitor artifacts. Susan had accepted a position training alien military forces in human combat techniques, while Lisa had become the lead navigator for exploration missions into previously unknown regions of space. Every member of the crew had found new purposes that built on their experiences in the Nexus Void. "The elimination of the Umbral Syndicate has allowed us to explore regions of space that were forbidden for millennia," the chairman continued. "We have discovered 17 new civilizations that were trapped by the creatures and 6 ancient archaeological sites of enormous scientific value." Jake smiled as he heard about the positive results of their mission. The destruction of the ancient threat had opened up vast areas of space for exploration and research. The galaxy was a safer and more connected place because of what the Pioneer crew had accomplished, but perhaps most importantly, the chairman added, "Humanity has demonstrated qualities that we had not seen in any other species. Your ability to resist mental domination and your willingness to sacrifice for others have inspired changes throughout our galactic community." Jake knew that. The chairman was referring to the new protocols that had been established for dealing with psychic threats. Human mental techniques were now being taught to other species as a defense against entities that could control minds. The formal ceremony continued with speeches from representatives of dozens of different species. Each one told stories of how their people had been affected by the Umbral Syndicate, and how grateful they were for humanity's intervention. After the ceremony, Jake and his crew were invited to a private reception where they could meet informally with alien leaders. Jake found himself in conversation with Vextar, the merchant who had first warned them about the Nexus Void. "I still cannot believe that you survived," Vextar said as he shook his head in amazement. "My people have legends about ships that entered the Void, but none of them ever had happy endings. We were fortunate to find the progenitor weapon," Jake replied modestly. "Without their technology, we would have become just another group of victims. But you were the ones who chose to enter the Void when others would have fled," Vextar pointed out. "That decision required courage that most species do not possess." Jake looked across the reception hall at his crew, who were talking with various alien dignitaries. Ryan was explaining quantum drive technology to a group of crystalline engineers, while Susan was demonstrating human martial arts to some warrior species representatives. "My crew deserves all the credit," Jake said. "They followed me into the most dangerous region of space and risked their lives to save people they had never met." Lisa approached Jake and Vextar with an excited expression on her face. "Captain, I just received a message from Earth. The government has approved funding for 50 new exploration ships based on the Pioneer design. They want to establish permanent human presence in this sector of the galaxy." Jake felt pleased to hear that humanity was expanding their space program. The success of the Pioneer mission had convinced Earth leaders that humans could make valuable contributions to galactic civilization. "There is something else," Lisa continued. "They want you to command the new exploration fleet. You would be responsible for establishing humanity's first permanent base outside our home system." Jake considered the offer carefully. He had accomplished more than he had ever dreamed possible, but he also felt that there was still work to be done. The galaxy was vast, and there were probably other threats waiting to be discovered. "What do you think?" Jake asked his crew members who had gathered around to hear the news. "I think we should stay together," Tony said. "We make a good team, and there is still a lot to explore out here." "The aliens could use our help with other dangerous missions," Susan added. "We have proven that humans can handle threats that other species cannot." Ryan nodded in agreement. "The progenitors left other technology scattered throughout the galaxy. Someone needs to find it before it falls into the wrong hands." Jake felt proud of his crew's continued dedication to exploration and helping others. They had become heroes, but they had not let fame change their commitment to doing what was right. "Then we accept the assignment," Jake announced. "The crew of the Pioneer will continue to serve as humanity's representatives in deep space." The alien dignitaries who had overheard the conversation began applauding, and soon the entire reception hall was filled with the sounds of approval from dozens of different species. Later that evening, Jake stood alone on the observation deck of the space station and looked out at the stars. 6 months ago, he had been just another human captain on an exploration mission. Now he was responsible for representing his entire species to the galactic community, but Jake did not feel overwhelmed by the responsibility. He knew that humanity had earned their place among the stars through courage and sacrifice. The crew of the Pioneer had proven that humans could face cosmic horror and emerge victorious. The stars seemed to shine brighter now that the ancient darkness was gone. The Nexus Void had been replaced by normal space where ships could travel safely and new civilizations could be discovered. The galaxy was a better place because 42 humans had refused to accept the impossible. Jake thought about the future and all the adventures that awaited humanity among the stars. There would be new threats to face and new mysteries to solve, but he was confident that humans would meet every challenge with the same determination they had shown in the Nexus Void. The crew of the Pioneer had become legends, but their story was just the beginning of humanity's journey to the stars. Future generations would look back on this mission as the moment when humans proved they belonged in the galactic community. As Jake watched the stars, he felt grateful for the chance to be part of something larger than himself. The universe was vast and dangerous, but it was also filled with wonder and possibility. Humanity had taken their first step toward becoming a truly galactic species, and Jake knew that this was only the beginning.